So you're on the internet and you're searching stuff online, and the thing you're searching is cheapest night vision goggle. And one of the options that's going to show up is going to be this guy. This is the Jerry-14 from InfiRay. Now, if you've already seen our super popular Jerry-31 video that blew up a little while ago, the Jerry-14 is very similar to the J31. You basically take a J31, all its features, same glass, same tube, same material, same UI for the most part. You take a knife, you cut it in half, you put a J-arm on it, and you end up with the monocular version of the J31, which is the very tiny and very lightweight Jerry-14. In our opinion, it's a fantastic way to get started in night vision, but let's take a little bit of a deep dive, the unboxing experience, what you get in the box, features, and the performance, just as we always do on CHS, and let's see if this thing is actually any good. So the company that's making these devices is going to be InfiRay. They are most well known for their thermal optics, but they've been branching out to the night vision world with some really solid entry-level devices. That being said, these devices aren't assembled by us, like the PVS-14's RNVG's various Nocturne and LLI products. They are made by InfiRay. However, we do some QC when they get to our doors. One thing we do is we make sure to image these tubes so you can see exactly what you're getting. If you go to the ready to ship section on our website, you will see a drop down of a list of tubes and a list of devices, so that way you can pick the spec that you want. Another thing that we're going to be doing in terms of the devices themselves is we're going to be cleaning the output screens, making sure they're dust free so you don't have any dust blems or any blemishes that are caused by dirt and dust from the factory. And we make sure to reseal the devices with proper lubricants and new O-rings to boost that additional sealing, and also to make sure that your device feels nice and smooth in hand to adjust. The Jerry-14 and the 31 are going to be covered by a 3-year warranty under InfiRay, so if anything goes wrong with them, let us know and we will sort you out with InfiRay Canada's warranty. So when you get these devices, they're going to be coming in this really nice case over here. It's actually a pretty decent case. It's watertight. It's a nice hard case. When you open it up, you're going to get this bag, which the device is going to be in. It's a pretty nice nylon bag. Inside, you're also going to get your paperwork. You're going to get a certificate with your QC and your serial numbers on it. You're going to get your manual, which will show you how to use the more intricate features of the devices. So if you ever forget how to do any of that stuff, you can either refer to the video or back to the manual. And you're also going to get nicely individualized spec sheets for the NNVT-4 non-autogated tubes that are in this device. More into the tube and performance in a bit. So let's move back on inside the bag. So inside the bag, you're going to obviously find the J31 itself. On the J31, you can see here it has a rubber bumper on, which is pretty nice. So it kind of protects your nod if you want to bump it against your iPro. It doesn't scratch up your iPro. That comes off, and inside the bag, it also comes with a more old school eye cup. So if you like to run it 90s SWAT style, you can run an eye cup on your nods like this, and this kind of hides the reflection of the splashback of the screen from whatever opposing force you're using it on. You're also going to find inside a Jerry C bracket. We're going to get into that a little bit more later, but it is actually one of the most affordable ways you can get into a hybrid thermal setup. The last thing I want to talk about in the Jerry-14 package is going to be this, and this is an aluminum on-spec J-arm that comes with the J14 that uses a dovetail. Now, some monocular devices will come with a J-arm, but most of them are going to be plastic bayonet J-arms, and they have this little spring mount on top. They're not very good. I don't recommend using them because A, they're designed to break, B, they wobble around a lot, and in my opinion, and my nod usage philosophy is you want to have the best, most stable mount in front of your eyes so you can get the most out of your night vision device. The dovetail is actually made to spec, which is kind of interesting because the J31 dovetail is a bit off spec, which is why we had to change it, but the J14 dovetail is on spec, and it fits really nicely into this Cadex mount, and it will fit nicely into most Wilcox, Argus, and Naruto's mounts as well. This J-arm isn't as fancy as the others. It doesn't articulate, but it can go left and right with the push of this button over here. So if you're using it on your left eye, you can use it like this, and if you're using it on your right, you can use it like this. If you need more fine adjustments, you basically undo this front screw over here, and then you can kind of finely adjust the nod so you get a good and stable image in front of your eye, and it doesn't have much wobble at all. The other reason why I wanted to mention the fact that this comes with a J-arm, and a really good one at that, is because most monoculars, like I said earlier, don't come with a J-arm, or they come with a J-arm that isn't worth using. Now, that is something you actually have to factor into the total cost of your nod. If you're looking to just get into night vision, you're looking to get a solid device on your head, and you're looking to use this thing, it comes with a really user-friendly and good J-arm. So that does take maybe $200 or so off the top of your device. So now that the unboxing is done, let's get into the device itself from the front to the rear. Now, if we look at the front, you can see here it has a nice rubber day cap on. Now, one annoying thing I don't like about the day cap is the fact that it's kind of retained like this. It's a bit annoying, but what I recommend you doing for you end users at home is you can take this over here, you could put a piece of Velcro on it, and you can just stick it on somewhere on the body that's out of the way. Moving on to the side, it takes a single AA battery, which is nice because AA's are super plentiful. Now, on a single AA, InfiRay claims about 40 hours of battery life, which is very standard amongst AA monocular devices such as the PVS-14. Same thing in terms of that. Moving a little bit further back towards the front, you're going to see two emitters over here. Well, one of them is an emitter and one of them is going to be a light sensor. The emitter is going to be an IR emitter, so it has a built-in little IR illuminator. To activate that, you simply just press and hold the power button and you'll see a red light pop on and the IR illuminator will turn on. The other thing is going to be a light sensor, and if you enable the light sensing ability of the nods, if the nod detects that you're in a highlight area for too long, it'll automatically shut off to prevent damage to the tube. I personally don't use it, but it's a nice little feature to have. On the rear here, you have the diopter, so you can adjust this to your vision. So if you wear glasses or if your vision is not super great, you can fine tune this so that you have the nod nice and clear. And we're going to get to my favorite part of any Jerry series night vision, and that's going to be the UI, or the user interface. Now, I mentioned the UI a lot because I'm a sucker for good design, and I do think that while most nods have a really nice UI, the Jerry, in my opinion, has one of the nicest ones because it's very intuitive to how night vision devices kind of work for a person that's new to night vision. So normally on a PVS-14, you have two knobs. You have this one, which controls on-off, and you pull it for an IR illuminator. And then you have this one over here, which is going to be the gain knob. Now, it's not too complicated, but I've handed off a PVS-14 to a lot of people before to demo the device, and they actually found it a little bit tricky to figure out. Now, I always recommend playing around with your devices to get to know them before you put it on your head, so that way you don't drop your multi-thousand-dollar investment. When I hand off a Jerry to people, they automatically get it because the knurled surfaces on any nods are the ones you interact with, and there's really only one over here. And it's really easy. You just turn this and you turn it on for more gain. So this is a variable gain device. If you want to decrease the brightness, it's like a volume knob. You just turn it like that and the brightness goes down almost all the way to 0. And turn the night vision device off, you just pop it back into that detent. Again, to turn it on all the way, you turn it on like this, maximum gain, and then you pop it down and you can choose your gain levels in between like a cool volume knob. And like I said, that's pretty awesome. Now moving it back a little bit towards the bottom is going to be this thing over here. Now I screwed this on already, and this is going to be the integrated Jerry C mount. I don't know if there's a guy at InfiRay named Jerry that keeps naming all this stuff after himself, but Jerry just indicates their more military line of things. The Jerry C is this little guy over here. And we call the Jerry C your night vision's night vision. It's a clip-on thermal imager. If you guys ever seen that cool video online where the US Army shows off all this crazy prototype stuff, this is basically a bit more of a simplified version of that. What it does is it takes thermal images and it projects them into the image of the night vision device, so you get a cool overlay of any heat signatures. Why I want to mention this is because now you have a night vision device that can see in the dark, and you have a thermal that can see targets or heat signatures in the dark. And this is a really compelling package because what this does is allows you to save a bit of money on the night vision device, and you can add a thermal on for a little bit of an upgrade. And then what you get is you get a multi-spectral viewing solution. Now, what's interesting about this and why it's a great value proposition is because this is basically the most affordable way to get into what we call a hybrid thermal device. There's no cheap way to get into hybrid night vision. It's always going to be very expensive, but this is going to be the most value way you can get into it. And there's actually an incident where me and my coworker went out to test these things, and we saw a buck in Toronto that I couldn't see with my higher spec photonus tubes, but he could see with this exact device over here because he had a clip-on thermal on. Another great thing about the way that the Jerry-14 interfaces with the COTI is the placement of the device itself. First off, it has this integrated mount which has a nice little rubber shim on it, so it actually removes a lot of the slack, but it actually places the COTI here on the top of the device if you're using it on the right-hand side. So as you can see, the COTI is over here, and that might be a really odd place, but it actually doesn't get in the way of stowage. So if I were to stow this up, it stows fine, nothing is bumping it, which is great. And if I have it down here, it's not on the bottom and in the way if I were to use something like a weapon. And in this case, this is just a dummy airsoft gun. So if I were to actually aim through this COTI, I can see through the COTI and I can see through my hollow sight over here, which is pretty awesome because if it was down here, it'd be a little bit less manageable than if it was up here. So it's actually a really unobtrusive way to get it in your field of view. Now I actually can't see the CAUTI in the way, so I have nice peripheral vision. If you flip it to the other side, it's actually still pretty decently out of the way. Now it's more in the way because it's in the middle, but if it was at the bottom, I would actually have trouble bringing the weapon to my eye. Now in this case, if I'm a left-handed shooter, I can still bring the rifle to my eye, still see through the optic no problem, and as you can see, it doesn't get in the way of the operations of the rifle. Let's get into the weight of the devices. So the Jerry-14 is actually really small and ultra lightweight. The battery is already installed, and we're going to see the weight here on our scale. It's going to weigh a very measly 250 grams. If we were to include the J-arm over here, now it weighs just over 300 grams at 316 grams, which is really nice. Let's compare that to a PVS-14. In this case, it's a OE PVS-14, which is another one of our budget lineups. It actually weighs more at 330 grams without a J-arm. Now, if you were to include an ultralight J-arm, such as this AX-14, the weight would go up to 356 grams. So we're already winning in the weight department with the Jerry, which is pretty awesome. Now let's compare that to something a little bit more interesting. This is a Nocturne Industries Tanto. We did a pretty awesome review on this, which is a great simplified and ultra lightweight goggle that uses mil-spec lenses. And that weighs 244 grams. So it weighs very similar to the Jerry-14, and with the J-arm, you're looking at just under 300 grams. Of course, if you were to use a metal J-arm with that, you'd be weighing in around 300 grams. So the Jerry-14 and the Tanto are pretty much neck and neck in weight, but the Jerry-14 is going to be a lot cheaper and will come with manual gain where the Tanto does not. If we look at the profile of all of these three devices stacked up side to side, we have the PVS-14 over here, the Tanto, and the J-14. As you can see, the J-14 is really tiny and small. It can fit pretty much into the palm of my hand and is a great pocket device for observation. The Tanto is a bit bigger, although it is still about the same weight. It's a really impressively weighted device, but it's much more Spartan in features compared to the J-14. The PVS-14 being the gold standard and being a much older design is obviously going to be much heavier. It is a very proven design, but if you're looking for weight savings, the J-14 will weigh less than both of these two options in standard configurations, as well as the profile of the device will be a little bit smaller than even the Tanto. We're going to get into the programmable features of the Jerry-14. First off is going to be a feature that I think is going to be used more often, and that's going to be the programmable auto off when stowed up. That's a lot of words, but basically what that means is you can disable or enable this feature that when the nod is turned up, it turns off, and when it flips down, it turns on automatically. The way you do that is pretty simple. So the knob on the rear here that acts as the power knob, it is also the programming button. So what you're going to do is it comes off by default, and you're going to tap it 3 times really quick, 1, 2, 3, and you're going to notice a blue light inside flash 2 times slow, which means the feature is turned on. So when the nod is on, if you flip it up, as you can see, it's going to be off, and when you flip it down, it's going to turn on again. That feature might be useful for you depending on your needs. Of course, what I find is that it's pretty useful for protecting the nod. If you look all the way up, it turns off. So if you're looking up ladders a lot or doing any weird stuff like that, you might want to be careful with that feature. But again, you can disable that if you wish. Another feature that you can disable or enable, I generally leave this off, is going to be the highlight cutoff. Now you tap the button 5 times fast, and you'll see a green light flicker 2 times slow to turn on or 2 times fast to turn off. And what that does is if the nod is exposed to bright light for about a minute or so, the nod automatically shuts off to protect the tube. So in this tube, we're looking at a NNVT-4 non-autogated tube with a FOM of 1434 with an SNR of 22.4 and a resolution of 64. A few characteristics about the NNVTs that we've been getting, whether they've been in the Jerry or the ones for our own assembled units, is they're remarkably clean tubes. So for some reason, the NNVTs actually have lower blems than other brands of tubes, even though they don't perform as well. If you're really concerned about the clarity and cleanliness of your tube image and you don't want any black spots and stuff like that, the NNVTs are fantastically clean. Now, one thing I mentioned when I was listing off some of the specs of the tube is the fact that these aren't auto-gated. And I have to say this a million times, just because they're not auto-gated doesn't mean that the tube is not protected against bright light. I could shine this tube into this diffuse light over here for a long time without any streaking or problems because A, it's a Gen 2 tube and Gen 2 tubes are a bit more resistant to light damage, but also because NNVTs have excellent what's called bright source protection. What bright source protection does is it basically lowers the voltage that the tube can take, therefore protecting it from light at the cost of resolution. I do like autogated tubes, and they do have some advantages, like the ability to have a greater range of contrast when there's bright light, and also the ability to basically maintain the resolution a bit more. However, what I find from NNVTs is their autogating frequency is rather low compared to other tubes, especially compared to Photonis, which is famous for their ultra-fast autogating technology. What this does is it can cause some distracting elements depending on the frequency of the lights being used, because the NNVTs have a slower gating response compared to other tubes. Now, the non-gated NNVTs, while the resolution is lower in this case, I actually find the image a bit more resolvable because it doesn't have that slower pulse. So, depends on your needs, but what my main takeaway from all of this is just because they're non-autogated doesn't mean that they're not durable or you can't use them in mixed lighting conditions. Obviously, be smart with them. Don't point them at the sun, and don't leave them on your windowsill for extended periods of time, or point at a lava lamp or something like that, and you'll be fine. So let's get into some side-by-side comparisons on the performance of this tube and the glass. And I have a little secret for you. I'm actually going to be replaying the Jerry-31 video because I actually used a Jerry-14 to film that one. But one thing about the J14 and the Jerry-31 is they actually use the exact same glass, the exact same series of tubes, so you can expect the exact same series of performance from both of them. The only difference is the J31 is a binocular and the J14 is a mono. So let's get into it. So here are the camera specs for our tests. We had to switch to the 16-35 GM lens here because the Jerry-14 lens and the Jerry-31 lens is not compatible with the standard lens adapter I normally use. But for full disclosure, let's get started with the Hoffman test, which we're going to start at 1 millifoot Lambert. The Hoffman can output a very fixed amount of light, so it's a great way of comparing tubes. And what we're looking for is how well the tubes resolve these lines, like an eye chart test, as the light levels decrease. If you've seen our previous videos, you're going to be very used to this test. We have the Jerry-31 on the left side of the video, all the way up to a PVS-14 with full Carson glass and a very nice Photonis green tube on the right side of the video, representing our highest performance end of the budget nod lineup we have here. So I apologize for the Jerry-31 having some shaky footage on some of the tests. With the Jerry-31 and the 14, they use proprietary glass, so the camera adapter doesn't fit perfectly as I'm holding the camera still. Given that they do use proprietary glass, I do think it performs quite admirably compared to the Optronics glass and the Carson glass in terms of light transmission and the clarity of the image. Now, the Jerry-31 does have the lowest specs out of these three tubes, with the Photonis green phosphor leading the pack, with its higher contrast and better image overall, but I don't think you're losing any significant detection with the Jerry-31, although in lower light conditions, obviously with better tubes, you're going to get better performance. But all things considered, price, form factor, the Jerry-31 performs quite well. Now, the lower SNR here does not do the Jerry-31 any favors, and you're going to see a lot more scintillation or noise compared to the other two tubes, which is a factor when choosing for low light performance. As we dip down to the extreme low light, you can see that the Photonis holds the strongest out of the three, whereas the Jerry and the other NNVT-4 AG are actually quite similar in performance, with the NNVT-4 AG coming out slightly higher due to a few more points in SNR, but as we go down to complete darkness, all three tubes will need supplemental illumination to see anything. Low light performance and detection are only one aspect of measuring a night vision system. Another one is going to be the performance of the lens itself, especially when it comes to things like distortion. So in this reference chart, we're looking for A, which is going to be a flat and neutral image. B is what we call barrel distortion, which you see most often with fisheye lenses, and in my opinion is extremely undesirable. C is pincushion distortion, and you see this with zoom lenses. Most nods have a little bit of pincushion distortion. It's not too noticeable, but if it gets really bad, it can create a weird tunneling effect on your images. And D is the least desirable, and that is going to be mustache or wavy distortion, which is a combination of the two. So we load up the distortion chart on the Hoffman machine here to see how well they render these lines. In this case, the Jerry was actually really impressive. It does produce a very flat image with very little distortion. There is a little bit of pincushion distortion on the edges, which is normal for any convex glass, but the Jerry does really well here. I would consider this an extremely flat and distortion-free image in all accounts. Budget glass tends to have a problem with controlling distortion, And you can see this with Optronics glass. Now, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend an OE14 to someone who just wants to get started with nods, but if you're looking for something that has less distortion, the Jerry glass definitely has less distortion than the OE glass. The OE glass does have much more pin cushioning around the edges, and the lines and squares are not rendered as straight. Now, compared to the Carson 14 glass, which I consider the king, mil-spec 14 glass is going to be better, in my opinion, than the Jerry-31 glass. It has flatter lines and much better rendered images. However, you have to look at the cost. The Jerry-31 costs a fraction of what a Carson lensed bino would cost in most cases, or what a Carson lensed mono would cost for the Jerry-14. So, in terms of cost, InfiRay did a wonderful job controlling the distortion of their lenses, and they produce very flat and pleasing images. Out of the labs and into the light, and we're going to start with our urban lighting test. We do this test because nods are often used in these environments, and they allow us to see how nods perform when there's lots of mixed lighting conditions and stressors on the tubes and glass. Off the bat, all three devices perform quite admirably. I can see into the dark areas perfectly fine, but the Jerry does have some considerations compared to the other two. You do notice the Jerry does produce a bit of a flatter image compared to the OE, which we discussed before, but it does seem to be struggling with a bit of the clarity of the image. And this is for a few reasons. First off, it does have the most modestly spec tubes out of the three, which is to be expected considering it's the cheapest device per eye compared to the other two. It also has bright source protection instead of autogating, which means in these mixed lighting environments, it must drop more resolution compared to the other two to protect itself against bright light, especially compared to the Photonis, which is famous for their ultra-fast autogating and their minimal resolution loss. The Jerry is also going to have a bit of chromatic aberration. Now, what's chromatic aberration other than a setting that you turn off in a video game? Chromatic aberration is caused when the lens disperses the different wavelengths of light and it manifests itself in fringing along the edges of things. Chromatic aberration is a bit more noticeable in the edges of the Jerry's image, as well in areas where there's lots of light to disperse. In lower light environments and in the center of the image, it's far less of an issue, but it's something that we thought we'd point out. Another thing I noticed when I was editing this video was going to be the distortion. So in the Carson and in the Jerry, you notice that building in the bottom left corner looks pretty flat. However, in the OE, it looks like it's slanted downwards. Now, it isn't in real life, and this is why distortion is important. It's very noticeable in urban environments, and the Jerry handles that very well. So we've taken these three devices out to the forest for some testing. Now, there is no more canopy. Winter is coming here in Canada, so all the leaves have fallen. However, the devices are still scintillating, and we're giving them a bit of a chance to flex their muscles. In this case, the Jerry-31 is going to have a lot less chromatic aberration, and that's because there is a lot less light sources for light to disperse and cause that fringing. So if you're using these in rural environments or in the forest, chromatic aberration isn't really going to be much of an issue compared to in urban environments. The Jerry-31 also has excellent light transmission. The image is quite bright, and the details are rendered decently. Now, they aren't as good as the PBS-14 standard or the mil-spec 14, but considering the price point, it performs perfectly adequate. Now, is this adequate enough for you? I'm going to leave all these tests here for you guys to figure that out and make that decision for yourselves. So is the Jerry-14 the device for you? And I think in a lot of cases, the J14 is an excellent entry-level device. It offers good, solid performance with a decent price point, and it offers great features such as an included solid J-arm, manual gain, programmable features, and higher illuminator, included day cap, etc., etc. And it also comes in really light and really small, so it's easy to carry around. Like I always say, the best nod is going to be the one that you have on you. And the Jerry-31 and Jerry-14 come in at price points substantially lower than other night vision devices, allowing you to get your feet wet with real analog night vision, and you can use that other money to get things to set up your night vision. So a lot of people upgrade their devices, but they keep things like mounts, dots, lasers, etc. throughout their entire nod journey. So depending on what your goals are, the J14 is an excellent buy. It is a great addition to our lineup, and it is a pretty cool little tiny nod with a lot of features. I actually really like this thing. There you have it, everybody. Cold Harbor Supply, you know where to find us for all your night vision needs, and that's that.